Hello there, and welcome to episode 2 of our podcast that does not have a name. Welcome, everybody. We are having a great day, morning, night, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. So we're going to be talking about our inner world today. And a lot of you requested it last time we spoke. So last time we kind of sort of talked about our inner world and the different regions of our inner world, and we also talked about everyday life. But yeah, so last time we talked about our inner world, we talked about life with d.i.d, we talked about the different regions, the Vale, the tribal lands, the kind of the main area where our main fronters are, and the empire, the bridge, and onto the island. One thing we didn't cover on last episode is the catacombs. So I know Aether's system has is kind of similar, but not really. The birds want to chime in. They think that me talking is inappropriate, I guess. So I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Leon, and I'm from the Nether tribe. And I kind of branched out. That's part of history, I guess. Is I'm in a world, I cart illegal items from place to place. And so there's one thing that I cart. It's called the red flower, and I can say that out here because it's not known as anything out here, but it is kind of like a hallucinogen. And so I ended up taking too much of it and thinking that there was a dragon attacking my village. Is actually a tribe, but I'm gonna say village for now anyway, because I use those interchangeably for some reason. And so I went ahead and basically destroyed the thing, trying to defend it from like a dragon that didn't exist. So I ended up saying, okay, well, I need some time and I need to like distance myself from here and go elsewhere. That's not the first time I've branched out of my tribe, but that is the first time that I've like removed myself. But yeah, that's a little background on me and who I am. I am what some people would call the keeper of information. If somebody has information or secrets to tell, guess who gets the details? This guy. So I guess I'm a good person to talk about the history of our inner world because I know a lot of information about it. I might miss some details, I might skip over a couple of things, but you'll get a pretty good understanding of the history. But yeah, so I guess the history portion is the important part. So we'll jump back probably about 12,000 years. And for Inner World, our time moved very quickly for a long time. So for us, it felt, normal, 12,000 years, that it went by normally. But for somebody on the outside, say Mex, it did not go by, or it went by in like years took days. It was weird. We'll jump back 12,000 years. And I'm gonna grab a piece of paper actually, so I can like write down what we've gone over, so I don't double back and try to repeat myself. We have some paper down here. Okay, so we're jumping back 12,000 years ago in our system's history. So at that time, we had 36 tribes, 2 empires, and a lot of controversy. At that time, the Shadow Tribe had not appeared. We have the Shadow Tribe. So we didn't have the Shadow Tribe yet. That was still kind of lurking in the background. But we had 36 different tribes, which vary on species. So we have those who have like fawn legs and antlers, centaurs, lizard people. There was a lot of different types of tribes. Planet of the Apes type looking people, things like that. So there's 36 of these, and they all varied, and some of them were related, but a lot of them were not. Now, during this time, we had so my tribe, the Nether tribe, and I want to say the West tribe, or the Bird tribe. We had a pact together because our tribe was mostly construed of males and theirs was mostly construed of females. And so anytime a baby of the opposite gender was born, we'd swap, we'd give the children to the other tribe, which in retrospect is messed up and should not be done. Obviously, we have changed our ways since then. This is just the history, guys. Don't judge us for our history. And so that would happen, and a lot of times it wasn't pleasant for anybody. The moms were upset. The children didn't really grow up to their fullest potential. That type of thing. It was pretty sad at the time, and that went on for, God, so long. Much longer than it should have. That was just part of what was going on at the time. The other tribes had similar deals, because there were population issues going around. And then we had 2 empires at the time. So now we only have 1, and at this time we had 2. And these empires were kind of on opposite ends of each other. One was closer to the river, and one was closer on the other side of the tribal lands. So you have one empire here, the tribal lands, then we had this mountain pass, flatlands, and then the empire. But yeah, so we had the 2 empires on opposite sides of the land, and the empire's job is to make the rules, how tribes conduct themselves, how they conduct themselves, how new populations will conduct themselves, how to deal with bringing up of villages and things like that. They had all the say. So they had all the say in what happened. And this is when I think one of the tribes wanted to branch out and create like 2 tribes. And the Empire wasn't having that. The Empire said no, because we need to conserve our forest and make sure that things are, you know, keeping an equilibrium. You're not able to separate your tribe and go off on your own to create another, you know, grounds. And so a lot of the tribes, I believe, let me go back into our records a little bit. 27 of them. Okay, 27 of them did not enjoy the idea that somebody had a say over what they could or could not do within their own tribe. And so they decided that they were going to have an uprising. And that's when the Great War started. So throughout this, it was about 2,000 years of bickering back and forth between the Empire and the tribes, and trying to figure out a good equilibrium. But the Empire, neither one of the empires wanted to give them leeway. And so began the Great War. And we call it the Great War because the empires at the time both had guards. And the guard is a term used for the army, at least in our inner world. And so with that, they definitely had some issues. We'll say that. And so not everybody agreed with the Empire and having a guard in the first place. They felt like it could be misconstrued and could just be there's a lot of issues that went on, disagreeing that they even had a guard at the time. So I said 27, right? 27 of the tribes went to war, and the other tribes were trying to gather themselves. That leaves 15. And so that's when the Empire on the west side of the map, fell, and they had to regroup and go to the main empire that we now have. And the tribes were dwindled down at the time. Let me see. Okay, so 18 tribes fell and 18 survived. Now that's a lot. And so everybody was hurting pretty bad. Several of the main tribes were wiped out. The lizards, the Planet of the Apes people, and I'm forgetting some of the tribes, but now we're at 18 and one empire. So now we're at 10,000 years back, right? So we were at 12,000. That was the start of the Great War. We had 36 tribes, 2 empires. Jump forward 2,000 years. We have 18 tribes and 1 empire. So let's jump into the empire's history, because this is kind of when things start to get interesting and intense for a lot of reasons. So the empire, started to rebuild, but, they were a bit smaller and they were just one. So at the time, they had a emperor, and I can't remember what his name was at this time. Yeah, so we couldn't remember what his name was. I was just checking in with a couple of people to see if anybody really remembered. We have it written down somewhere. So that emperor decided that they only wanted to target one. Yeah, so the emperor wanted to target one tribe, another tribe, which is my tribe, and we know that that tribe has not fallen. We came up with a treaty with them that in case anything happened to the rest of the tribes, or we were threatened in whatever way, we would come together and use the Empire as a safe zone. And in return, they were able to get some of our food supply. They were able to trade with us and get a couple of things. And so instead of fighting like so many wanted to, our previous leader at the time decided that it would be best not to, and to go ahead and just make a deal with them and you know, kind of buddy up with them. And so that's around the time when the shadow tribes started to appear. So now we're at 9,000 years back. We have a treaty with the Empire, and we have still 18 tribes, going on 19, because the Shadow Tribe has just started appearing. At this point in time, there's one person in the Shadow Tribe, Elsia, and the other one is Daniel. Elsia and Daniel. And they heard, and the Shadow Tribe had heard that the Empire was making treaties. And they thought, okay, well, maybe we can go in and see, you know, kind of what we could possibly get out of this, because we're not doing very well. We're only 2, and that, you know, it would just be nice to have a little bit of protection as we figure out what's going on. And so they went ahead and went over to the Empire, and the Empire saw the Shadow Tribe people as regular people for a couple hundred years. They made a deal as well, you know, they could trade, and it would be fine. What the Empire didn't know at the time, which caused a great mess for everybody, was the Shadow people had different gifts. They had gifts. Each altar had, or each member, I should say, because they're not all altars, but each member had a specific power that they held. Elsia's was, oh man, being kind of like antimatter. She could make things exist or not exist. And Daniel still won't tell anybody what his power was, you know. I said at the beginning, if you have a secret and you want to tell it to somebody, I'm the person to tell it to. He has not spoken a word. Nobody knows exactly what his powers are. And in order to have children, they have children in a very interesting way. Instead of the regular procreation, their energies, they kind of have this cloud form. Their energies will mix together, and they'll feel depleted after this, but their energies, when they're in this kind of like misty cloud formation, It's like they mist together, and with one another, it kind of creates a child, or I don't even think it's a child. It's almost like almost a full-grown adult. It would probably be somebody around the age of 14 or 15. So they don't have the traditional babies, which I think is really interesting, and they ended up having, of course I'm forgetting, I believe they had a child. And in that, it's also interesting because no matter, like, and some shadow people just appeared out of the ground, which I'll explain later. That comes into play with current events, but the interesting part is with that, the energy forming together, there's no DNA involved. So it's just real interesting. They're not related at all, but they are, because they're mixing together their power to create a new being instead of mixing together their DNA. So the Empire took kind of this dark turn as the shadow people were starting to grow in population. They started questioning some things, and so they ended up kidnapping one of them and then making a deal that they would instead of trading goods, they would trade powers for safety. And for a long time, the Shadow Tribe kind of went along with it. They didn't realize exactly what was happening or the magnitude. And what did I say her name was? Elsia? I believe I said her name was Elsia. Elsia had the power to, like I said, decreate, basically. Make things not exist. And so the Empire wanted to use that to their advantage, to gain land. She refused. And so at this point in time, the Empire was getting a little debated about, like, what they should do with Althea, because she wasn't cooperating. And Daniel, being her husband at the time, was like, where is my fiance or wife or whatever she was at the time to him? And they were, they were like, oh, for about 3 years they lied to him and said that she was on some sort of mission or something. I don't remember. And the tribe turns around, guys, so don't worry too much. The tribe turns around, and there's another war that happens, but we haven't gotten there yet. And so they started. At this point in time, Sophia comes into the picture. Her family comes into the picture. What was I saying? So Sophia came into the picture with her and her parents. So one of the shadow people had a biological child. So you remember how I was saying how the shadow people don't have DNA children, so anybody could have children with anybody. That doesn't mean that they can't have biological children. So somebody in the Empire had a child with somebody in the Shadow Tribe, and that child was sought after, and we later learned his name was Cain. And so Sophia's family agreed with, oh man, I can't remember, I think it was Cove. Agreed with Cove and the other person that they would harbor the child and hide him away. That worked for quite a few years. Now we're about 8,000, maybe 7,000 years back. So we're 8 to 7,000 years back at this point in time. So we were 12,000. Things were, you know, great. Everybody was flourishing. There was some stuff going on, and then the war happened. Then we went from 36 tribes and 2 empires to 18 tribes, so cut in half, to 1 empire, also cut in half. And now we have the tribal treaty with the empire. 18 tribes still. Shadow tribe was forming, and now we're in kind of like a slave tradery type of thing. The empire would loan out the shadow people, and in return, whoever was taking care of them would give the tribe something of value, whether that be like food, crops, animals, whatever it was. And so this happened for quite some time until somebody stepped up and said, hey, this isn't okay. Because the other tribes had no clue what was happening. They were so far out of the loop because the empire didn't want anybody to know what was going on. They were doing some shady shit. And so once word caught the tribes, they said, absolutely not. This is not what's going to be happening. And at the same time, Cain was found, but Cain ran. Sophia's parents were executed. Sophia was part of the guard, and they kind of used to do this like brainwashing type thing to make you feel like you had to be there and your loyalty is to them. They don't do that anymore. But going on from there, so Cain escaped. Sophia's parents passed away. Sophia was upset with the everybody, and so at that point in time, they were just everybody was heated. Everybody was raw. It was getting to the point where another war was bound to happen, and again, they wanted to use Daniel's wife as basically an executionist, which, I mean, kind of makes sense if you have to do that. You know, just make them not exist anymore. There's no pain there. But again, she refused. So they were working out a weapon to try and destroy the Shadow Tribe to control them better, something like that. I can't remember exactly what was happening, but so now the tribes are upset. The Shadow Tribe is beyond pissed. Sophia is starting to get some of her ranks in the guard to get like beefed up and get ready to go against their own people. So at this point in time, there's a person named Ember who is not in the guard but is fairly good at fighting. And then the tribes and one rank of the Empire's guard. And so they all go to the Empire and demand that the Emperor step down. And oh man, if you have ever seen, like, think of Narnia with the like bunches and bunches and bunches of just like huge armies just marching across the field. It's like that, going against like a quarter of that, because the tribes outnumber the Empire and the guard, and then part of the guard joined the tribes and the Shadow Tribe. And so at that, like, the Emperor decided, okay, you know, I'll step down. And um, this, like, he got sent away. He got exiled and no longer ruled, and like people kind of just chilled out. And now everybody's still trying to find Kane because they want to bring Kane back and reunite him with his two dads. Kane thinks that everybody's out to get him. There's like this happy reunion. So now every year around September, we have this festival that we go to in the Empire where all the tribes, on the mainland at least, all the tribes go, and we have this just potluck, and it's a 3-week festival. We sleep in, you know, people in the Empire's houses and everything, to celebrate the fall of that particular emperor. But then we have Ember. So things don't stop here. Things don't stop here. So there is another... So somebody was trying to make another empire. And ooh-wee. Ember, who is now... So now we're about 5,000 years back. So Ember got, like, put in as emperor. He was the one that got the old emperor to step down, and you know, in the end, that was him, and everybody kind of agreed with what was going on. But there was another empire that was trying to build themselves up and kind of challenge the current empire that we still have. Sophia fell in love, which is not allowed in the guard at this time. It is now. I'm going to say it is now, but at the time it was not, because when you're kind of like... They kind of call it... not soul bonding, but like... It's a very intense emotional bond that just, like... It would be devastating if the person that you had, if they passed away. So at this point, she should have told somebody that it was happening, because they could have been separated and been put into different sections of the guard, and like things would have been fine. But she didn't tell anybody, he didn't tell anybody. And so when they went to war with this new kind of empire, she jumped in front of her other. And unfortunately, that doesn't bode well for either of them. Basically, I'm just gonna say this: altars can't die. So since she was a main person in the story, well, not story, but she's still a main fronter. But he was not, and so they both got executed. And just, yeah. And she woke up next to her parents' burial site and to her, you know, fiance. She went back, and the Empire was like, "Oh my gosh, you're like indestructible." She was very upset and decided that Ember was to be dethroned. But she couldn't figure out how to do it. Yeah, we have a lot of dark history. But yeah, so I mean, it happens in real world too, like real world life too. Things like this used to happen a lot. Not saying it's normal, not saying it's accepted anymore. And so Sophia spent up until 12 years ago planning on how to dethrone Ember. So she kind of went along with everything. she went along with everything and bowed down for the time being until she could figure out exactly what was happening. Now the Shadow Tribe was now acquaintances. They started moving into their own territory. Everything was getting a lot better between everybody, and it was just like a time of peace finally. Like everybody was chilling out. And the reason why none of our main fronters currently are being mentioned, such as not myself, but Ashley, Max, anybody who's kind of like a OG to our system, is because they were underground at the time and they had no clue any of this was ever going on. So for them, they were in like this underground type house thing, and they were just going about their business, you know. Ashley, Xander, Honey, I can't remember everybody who was the OG. Casper, I think. So they were like underground and they weren't really aware of anything that was going on. And so, let's see. So the tribes were, you know, kind of like chilling out, but they had something else to face. So it was during this time of peace, so we're at 3,000 years back now. A lot of time goes by and they're kind of at this time of peace. So we're at probably about 3,000 years back. We were 12,000 years back, so holy cow, we've made it. So now we're at 3,000 years back. And the Hellhounds, who we've spoken about before, they're these dogs with bone heads and this like very weird textured leather feeling bodies. We were talking about this the other day in our first episode of this podcast. About the size of a school bus, maybe like half a school bus or a special ed school bus. Some of them are bigger than others. So these guys, my tribe in particular, the Nether tribe, moved closer to what we call the Dead Forest. And so we started having issues with territory bounds. The Hellhounds started coming into our area and cutting down some of our population, and we would just defend ourselves. We weren't after like hunting them for fun or anything like that. We were just defending ourselves. Now it turns out at this point in time, I have the details for this now. I wouldn't have maybe 8 months ago. I didn't have these details, but now I have these details. So down in the catacombs, which we mentioned at the very, very beginning of this podcast, down in the catacombs, we have Lucif, we had Rune, and a couple of other, I guess you'd call them henchmen. Lucif created the Hellhounds to create some balance within, I can't remember what was happening. I think it was a population issue with some form of animal that was not affecting us at the time, but was further down south, and we still haven't discovered that area as of yet, but we will. So he created these hellhounds to, you know, keep a population in the south under control. And they attacked my tribe multiple times, and we would defend ourselves. And he also created the Shadow Tribe. So that's why some of the Shadow Tribe would pop up out of the ground. So he created the Shadow Tribe to just bring, I don't know if it was balance or nuance or what. I haven't talked to him on the specifics. I just know that he created the Shadow Tribe. And the Shadow Tribe are doing really good. They're, you know, they have their own space. They're starting to learn their own powers. You got, at the time, this is probably about 2,000 years back, we got Cove and Keeper, who are reliant on one another. Kane is still missing. Kane is just nowhere to be seen. Sophia's still planning her plot against Ember. The tribes are, you know, defending themselves against these hellhounds. And so everything is kind of like, it's at a chaotic state, but it's not really problematic. And everything's being kind of handled. There's a balance between chaos and peace, festivals, and just feeling, you know, in joy of just sort of peace, except for Sophia and Ember. Sophia and Ember are not feeling great towards one another. And so it's about 1,000 years back when Sophia joined in with the OG Fronters. Sophia went ahead and went down and found the OG Fronters, their little area, and she kind of like staged, like, she had lost her memory. She actually had lost her memory, and so she staged that, you know, she didn't know what was going on, and she remembered, like, losing her parents and fighting alongside somebody, and but yeah, so welcome Sophia in, and eventually expanded and, like, built up and went outside and found a bunch of stuff. That was a fun time. Then the Nighthawks kind of came in and started also picking off the population of the tribes. We figured out that in order to just keep them away, they didn't like light, so we have torches lit at night, and that smoothed everything over. But then a fever in the tribes hit. So remember, we had 18 tribes, right? We only have 6 now. Because there was a fever that rolled through, and I think some of the OG people even got sick. It rolled through the Empire, it rolled through the valleys, it rolled through the tribes and the Shadow Tribe up to the north. I don't know if the Vale got affected. I don't have word from the Vale. But yeah, so now we're at 6 tribes, current time, 1 empire, and a very fascinating, like, just interesting inner world that I had no clue could get this creative. Yeah, and so Sophia went back up after the, you know, the OGs built their houses and such, and she saw our tribe and thought it was really weird. Like, we had pictures of who they were, and I think that I don't remember exactly how we got those. I they kind of just floated to us. Sometimes things materialize. So they went in, and Sophia didn't understand. So we were about ready to fight with them. And then the Empire stepped in and was like, no, 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 no. You don't get a fight. And Sophia was like looking at Emperor and was like, okay, something has to be done here. So she went to the Empire and regained some of her memory. It took her a long time to like remember a lot of things, but it was intense for a bit there. She had lost her memory and then regained it a little bit at a time. She didn't remember that Ember was awful, but she tried to reason with him and... Hold on. Oh, sorry about that. She tried to reason with him, and he said no. And then she remembered that he did an awful, awful thing, and was just like, okay, well, it's time for you to go. And so she was able to get the tribes together, she was able to get the guard together, and they sat in and had like this big monumental argument. And then Ember faked his death. And that's where I'm gonna end you off on this episode. Ember faked his death. So that is the main history of our inner world. We have a lot of other things that have happened. Individual tribe disputes. Yeah, we're leaving you off with that cliffhanger. Does inner world war or general bad situations reflect outer world conflict? Sometimes. For us, this was just I don't know, history. Whenever we're fighting, it's there's stuff that does coincide with out here. How long did it take to find that info? Years. I have been collecting for so long. It's been about 100 years of me just searching. How do you deal with morals in our world? Because obviously there are people that have done bad things, but they're all a part of your system. We struggle with this. So we do have like minor punishments. You can't front for a week. You can't do this. You're restricted to these hours or this day. Things like that. And a lot of times the people with bad morals in our world will restrain out here because they know that there are laws and such that if they were to attempt to try and like break, we would end up in a worse off place. So for us at least, they kind of know. Can any of you look inside and see inner world while fronting? Most of us can. We got rats in the background. We rearranged our room a little bit, so our rats are now on the back wall. Any of you? But yeah, most of us can look in inner world. Some of us with very strong amnesia cannot. Like me, I can look kind of inside and just see the general area of where I am. It's almost like an eagle's view, for safety's sake. Have we checked our emails? Not yet. We kind of have been feeling under the weather. We have a sore throat. So we haven't really been checking very much. Does time in your inner world go faster or slower or the same as the outside world? It used to go really fast. It used to go like the time felt like it was passing normally, but if we were to front, things would kind of pause. I don't know exactly how to explain it. Basically, time used to move a lot faster, and now it moves at a normal speed. Are you the only kind of information gatherer for the whole inner world, or is there someone who has more single controlled knowledge over everything going on? So I'm kind of like our history keeper, and that's why a lot of people trust me with their secrets and knowledge and history. I'm still gaining knowledge about the island. I'm still getting trust there. I have some information, but not a ton. But there's people in every like area that have knowledge of that area. Do you have any tips for communication? We should be releasing in the next 2 days a journaling and communication video, and that should be in the next couple of days, as long as we don't fall too sick and just kind of feel like we have a cold right now. But yeah, journaling stuff or writing apps isn't safe for us. When do you do when you don't have that option? Meditation, I think, is a great way. Kind of silencing your mind, closing your eyes, trying to reach in your inner world, and like, you can talk out loud if you want to, or you can like project your voice inner world. Sorry, I read the journaling thing wrong. Is there any way to be able to go to your inner world without it feeling like a dream? And is there any way to help yourself remember what happens while you're in the inner world? I'm not positive. Honestly, for me, I'm a very like grounded person, and I enjoy things inner world. So going inner world is just like really easy for me, and it never really feels like a dream. So I don't personally have any advice, but if anybody else does, feel free to post that in comments as well. Can the host practice access going to the inner world? Yes. Depends on your host. Like, Dorian still has trouble reaching inner world. Max for a long time couldn't get inner world, but eventually was able to meditate into it. Is the Empire still evil? No. That's going to be in the next episode. We'll explain what happened after Ember faked his death. A while ago, one of your alters told us they were in prison for like 8,000 years. Is that normal to all of you, or was it like a thing for their tribe? They were... that was them on the island, so that was an island cultural thing, and I'm not positive if that's normal still, or if that was normal. But we can have Splinter talk on that if you'd like. Is there something I can do to help with Kokon headaches? People have started getting Kokon a lot more and recently. The headaches are becoming unbearable. I would encourage a switch. For us, at least, whenever we're co-conscious and we are getting a headache, usually it means one of the people doesn't want to get up the front. So we try to encourage the switch to happen, to kind of ease up that pain. Otherwise, Excedrin works magic. For us, anything we built in some kind of model, be it drawing, Minecraft, whatever, feels less dreamlike because we built it. Yeah, definitely. On the next episode of Leon Tales from the Underworld. Yeah, definitely like drawing it out or putting it in some kind of physical form. Bit random, but can you elaborate on gatekeepers and how I can tell who it is? I don't have a lot of information on gatekeepers, but as far as I know, they kind of like keep information. They control who fronts. and they control who has access to information, so kind of like making sure that littles don't have access to trauma if that isn't what they're meant for, that type of thing. So I think keeping altars safe, I think that's their main purpose. Do you have any way of telling who you are when you're fronting? Used to not be a problem, but lately it's been like, I don't know. Usually if you can't tell who you are, that just means you're kind of like a blended mess. We just felt like we were a co-conscious mess, or there was like more altars fronting than should have been. So grounding, practicing your grounding techniques. We have a very hard time switching. We've tried letting the switch happen, but then people just leave and I'm stuck in limbo. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I would practice grounding if you're having issues with switching. Just like ground and try to, you know, reach in and be like, who's co-conscious with me? Do you want to front? And trying to practice that communication. Alright guys, so I think that is all we have time for today. But yeah, so that's all we have time for today. We, discussed a ton. You guys are more than welcome to review this once it's posted. Anyway, I want to thank every one of you for watching. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. Our Patreon is in the links below, along with, any merch that you might want. We have ANA merch, Gob Squad merch, Stacy trademark merch, Pickles and Knives, if you were there for that live stream. We have a ton of stuff down below. Our second channel, we have an art channel, so if you guys like line art, should be linked down below. The birds are bidding you goodbye and want me to stop talking. But yeah, so any links that you guys might want is down below in the description. I fixed the Patreon link, so if you're looking into that, feel more than welcome. Anyhow, I bid you adieu. Have a great day, night, afternoon, morning, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.